Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Man, that was the best part of this episode right there. Too bad we didn't have the recording on. Well, I have the woman, the myth, the legend, Sheri Jacobs with me here. Sheri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we were just starting to chat here before we started the recording, and so much overlap, so much commonality, so many good things to talk about. You've got a new book that is in the works. It is imminent, and not eminent, but imminent. It will be eminent also, but it is imminent. It's called The Unexpected Power of Boundaries. We're going to talk about that for sure. For the folks that don't know, could you please share a little bit about your professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
Sure, absolutely. I started actually as a photojournalist. So one of my favorite stories is telling how I was able to shoot Michael Jordan when he played for the Chicago Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons, sat on the floor, manual camera, film days, and worked for a newspaper. And I worked in photojournalism and photography for a few years before I made a pivot or a shift to the nonprofit world. And it was an easy transition because I started a nonprofit and then I looked for a job in the nonprofit world, and there happened to be an association. So I worked at 3 associations, moving up to the chief membership officer and chief marketing officer for years. And then that entrepreneurial spirit just came out and said, let's see what we can do. And so I started my own company 16 years ago. And over the last 16 years, I have surveyed about 500,000 people, collected more than 1 million data points across every single industry. And over that time, I have done a few other things, including giving keynotes around the world. And about 5 years ago, I picked up a camera again and started photographing wildlife. And I travel to Africa, Antarctica, and the Arctic. And I'm actually going back to Botswana in 1 week for my 8th trip there.
And I think you also do this running thing.
I do. So I was actually a non-runner as a child. In fact, I was well known for my dislike of running. So much so that when they needed a goalie to play on the soccer team in high school, I raised my hand and said, kick balls at my face, just don't make me run laps. And that was the deal that I made with my coach. So when I was 29, I started running, and because I'm a little bit type A and I like to accomplish things, I didn't just set my sights on running. I set them on marathons and qualifying and running the Boston Marathon. So now I have run 18 marathons, 3 Bostons, and I've kind of say I've retired my running, and now I've picked up tennis.
Wow. Totally amazing. Totally amazing. Well, let's, you want to jump into boundaries next?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the impetus for writing this book, and then we'll dig into some of the nitty-gritty, contrarian, brilliant things that you say about what boundaries are and what they're not, and what boundaries do and what they don't. But what made you study this concept in the first place?
So I heard a story not too long ago that made me dig deeper. And that story was a simple story about a landscape architect named Tatiana Goodman, who was curious about how physical boundaries impact how children play, how creative they are, how they explore, how they experiment. And so she created this little experiment. She asked a group of preschool teachers to take their kids, to a park. And this park, you can imagine it. You can picture it in your head. It has wood chips, a very defined boundary, and this small little playground with the slides and the swings, and then a big grassy area, but no hedge, no fence, no boundary. And even though the kids were not given any instructions about where to play or anything like that, every single one stayed on the playground, stayed within that wood chips boundary. Well, a week later, she had the same group of teachers bring the same group of kids to a different park in town. And this one had the playground and the wood chips and the park, but it had a fence that enclosed the entire space. And what she observed was that as soon as they got to the park, the kids ran and they explored every inch of the park all the way up to the fence. And they were more creative in their play, inventive in their play. They even tried things. And if it didn't work, if that playing didn't work, they went to a different game. So in my mind, they experimented, failed, and then tried something else. And when I read that story, I thought about how we all feel safe when we know exactly how far we can play. When we have clarity around the boundaries, it's actually freeing rather than limiting. So I hear this story, and then I dug into the research I've conducted over the last 15 years with thousands of people. And when I looked at when people get stuck, when they feel they have challenges, it's not because they have unlimited resources or the lack of resources, or it's always because they have lack of clarity around where they can go. And then you add to that the noise that we have today, the unlimited opportunities, the AI, all the social media platforms, everything we can do to amplify our voice and to get our message out there. That all that noise creates a situation where we stick on our playground.
I can totally envision that scenario, by the way, with the kids, where they have all of this massive open space, but they sort of almost trap themselves into this little area where it's like, well, I guess we'll stay here because this is sort of the play area, as opposed to same big, huge area enclosed in a fence. They go everywhere. They explore. They don't go outside the fence, but they go everywhere. You know, they go to the jungle gym. They go to the slides. They go to the water fountain. They go to the bathroom. And they're all, and like you said, if they get bored with one thing, they just jump into the next thing because it's all within the boundaries of the fence. Such a great image, and it really clarifies. I'm curious, all this research, this proprietary research that you've done, what kinds of questions or what were the kind of the topic areas of these various surveys that you've done?
Well, there are a variety of surveys I've done, and I combined it with other surveys that have also been conducted. So recently, Harvard Business Review School, they just released a study that was similar to the questions I asked, and they looked into when there was an abundance of resources. So it's asking questions around what are your goals? What do you think are the challenges that's holding you back, and providing a number of response options to that? And then where is there opportunity? And what I found, and I experienced myself when I worked at a startup 25 years ago, when I looked at the data across every industry from healthcare to finance to education. And then when I read that study from Harvard, the same patterns kept emerging. And that is that when there was an abundance of resources, but no clarity around where you can play. When there was, it was never the lack of opportunities or resources. It was always the lack of clarity that pulled people back, the lack of understanding, the uncertainty, the noise that was around it. And those were baked into my questions, but also the interviews that I did with entrepreneurs from tech companies to, everyday products that we use.
Fascinating. One of the things that I really love, among many, is that you mention somewhere in the jacket copy, I think, that the book is for leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, and change makers. So there's obviously a lot of myths both on the corporate side of this and on the entrepreneurial side of this. When you go and you speak to all these audiences, all these different industries, some entrepreneurial, some associations that may have a more entrepreneurial slant to their membership, and obviously a lot that have a corporate slant to their membership. How do you shift the message, having you yourself been on both sides of the fence, understanding both sandboxes? What are some of the misconceptions that entrepreneurs come into this with, and what are some that the corporate folks come into it with?
Sure. Well, one of the things I've heard is that I hear two things over and over again across all industries. And that is, We need to start thinking outside the box. I've walked into keynotes, I've been introduced, and the CEO will come up and say, we need some out of the box thinking. We have Sheri Jacobs here to speak. And the funny thing is that I'm saying, no, we actually need to define where the edges of the box are. Right. So that's a common thing that I hear across every industry, whether it is a franchise, whether it is an association in healthcare, all industries.
Yeah.
The other thing I hear is people saying we can do anything. And the truth is, you can do anything, but not everything.
Yes.
Stop short there, right? They don't always answer the where's our focus? And so the way that I customize it is that I find out, because I've done research with 300 organizations across all these industries, I do know at a deeper level what are some of the challenges that individuals who work in healthcare are facing, that work in finance, even everyday consumers. What are people that just are going to the work every day? And I'm able to pull in those threads that speak the language to some of the challenges they face in that industry too.
I'm curious, do you, when you're going to speak to an association, you just got the booking, do you launch a survey to that association membership and then use that in the keynote?
Such a great question. So sometimes I've already conducted the research with the industry and I know so much about them already. It could be a trade or an individual, but I already know a lot. When I have not conducted the primary research myself, I do the same kind of deep dive that I've done with my company with the client. So I ask them to share any data or information that they have. Second, I ask if I could set up interviews with different individuals who will be there so that I could hear their stories, because the data is not nearly as exciting or interesting as the stories that you get from those who work in the field. So I do those two things. And then I do my homework. So most great speakers today know that you can find out a lot initially from an AI like Claude or Chat, right? You can ask them questions, tell me about the industry or the field. And then because I'm a researcher, I know how to validate that data. So then I'll go and I'll look to see what it says. What are the big challenges? So that when I get on the initial call with them, I already know so much about them that they're almost taken aback by, wow, you did your homework before we got on the call.
Hey now, what a great episode, right? Are you ready to build your own Market Eminence game plan using the power of speaking, publishing, and podcasting? Book a chat with me to build your plan and see if and how I might help you further. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. No sales team, no pressure, no goofballs, just you and me having a CEO to CEO chat about what's possible for you and your company. Hop on with me, doitmarketing.com/call. And now, let's jump right back into the interview. I want to do just a little bit of an anti-AI rant, and feel free to jump in here if you want to. I'm working right now on and this might be a fun thing for you to think about as well, but I'm up for my new book that's coming about the same time frame as yours, actually. I decided, because it's the fall 2025, as we're recording this, you can't have book bonuses unless you have a companion AI prompt pack. So I have an AI prompt pack that goes with my Market Eminence material. And of course, it's kind of a meta thing, right? Because I'm partially using AI, I'm using ChatGPT to say, hey, give me a prompt that will surface, right? And then I tweak and I edit and I zhuzh it, but ChatGPT does 80% of the work. I do 20% of the work. It is still not where it needs to be. It is still making all kinds of crazy mistakes. It is making all kinds of assumptions. It is making up math, is making up facts, and you really have to be careful. Now, I've known this ever since November of 2022, but just literally last couple of weeks, having been heavily into it on a daily basis, when people think I can do all my research on ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, you can't. At least you can't, and be a credible professional like Sheri Jacobs is. So don't be dumb. Do your own research, think, validate, check, see what's going on. I want to talk a little bit about this mavericky element. A lot of people say we're going to break the rules, right? Think outside the box. You mentioned we're talking about category design, people going off and inventing their own little worlds that they want to be in. Where does being a maverick, breaking the rules, standing out and apart from the competition, Obviously, there are some companies that do that with great focus,
Mhm.
great boundaries, and great tenacity, and others are like a cork bobbing in the ocean. So perhaps for those CEOs or founders or executives who are wrestling with this right now, what is the Sheri Jacobs recipe for boundaried differentiation?
Absolutely. So I've got two stories, one as a photographer, one from the corporate world, to explain it, and a recommendation. But let me first start with actually the difference between risk tolerance and risk capacity. So risk tolerance is how we all feel, right? How do people in the room feel about making changes or being that maverick? Even if you want to be a maverick within the boundaries, which by the way, it's a lot easier to explore and to experiment once you know how far you can go.
Yeah.
But not everyone actually assesses their capacity for risk. So risk tolerance is actually not as important. What's much more important is assessing your capacity for failure, for taking risks. So that's the first step to do, and saying, okay, this is how far we can go. This makes sense when we look at our brand reputation, our revenue, and all the different KPIs that are important to you as a leader or as a company or an entrepreneur, right? So knowing your capacity for change. Second, I think that boundaries do the opposite of what people think. You can be a maverick, you can experiment, but knowing within the space. So years ago, I helped start up a company called SurePayroll, became the largest online payroll company in the world. But when we started it 25 years ago, nobody was doing any kind of financial transactions online. They were checking sports scores, they were sending emails, they were going to chat rooms. And we launched this company because we knew that there was a great way to leverage the technology. We did it with this entrepreneurial spirit and with strict boundaries of the audience we went after. We didn't go after every small business. We sharpened our pencil to cut through. And then once we broke through, then we could widen it. But after we succeeded and grew the company, how do you keep that entrepreneurial spirit? What do you do? How do you be that maverick? So we created the Best New Mistake Award. And so we gave out awards every year, the best customer service or other awards, and they were monetary awards. But the Best New Mistake Award, the winner got 4 times the dollar amount of any other award. And what would happen is we created, this is our risk capacity. These are our boundaries of where you can experiment and fail. We want you to continue to try new things and be bold and be that maverick in this company. It's the only way we'll continue to grow. But if you experiment, write it up. What did you learn from it? What changed? And then by putting that money, that award behind it, it really told the culture of the company, we encourage that kind of experimentation, but within this space. So I truly do believe that, you can't just say we have a culture of failure where we embrace it and where we allow it. Because what happened is that people will wander, they may explore, and then they'll go back to their comfort zone, the playground, the wood chips. And you can't just have a compliant area, because if they're compliant, they have strict boundaries, but they're not allowed to explore and experiment and be those mavericks. They're just going to be in that fear zone. So that innovation zone happens when you have high clarity around how far people can play, but also that culture of experimentation. That's where you can really allow it. So I think
really great.
It's a photography story, but I decided I'll pause there.
No, that's great. So the payroll company, am I right that was maybe 15, 20 years ago that started?
25 years ago.
25 years ago.
When the NASDAQ crashed is the day that I signed my letter.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Huh.
So that's 2000?
2000.
2000, yeah. I lost a lot of money that day. It was not fun.
No.
but it's I'll tell you why I bring this up. At that time, I still had my corporate job. I was at the end of my corporate career before I hitting the escape hatch like you did. And I worked for PeopleSoft. And PeopleSoft, of course, is an entire suite of, and they were bought by Oracle, which is an even bigger suite of financial and HR, dozens of applications. Was there pressure, either early on or later on, for this payroll company to go, oh, we know payroll, let's do benefits, let's do accounts receivable, let's do accounts payable, let's become like Workday, let's become like Oracle, let's have a whole suite of these products. I mean, payroll is just the beginning. Now let's go everywhere. And if there was that pressure or that thought, how did they stay focused on payroll? What was the discipline that kept them payroll?
Right. So there was always the intent to go into the founders, Troy Hennicoff and Michael Alter, who was the president at the time, they always had the intent to move into that space, but not before they succeeded and understood everything that they needed to around payroll. So yeah, was there pressure? Absolutely, but less pressure than you would think, because when the NASDAQ crashed, that eliminated all the potential funding we thought we were going to have. And so then it became, how smart can we get? How quickly can we, get smart on how to sell it? We had a really, and Troy Hennicoff says this so eloquently, we had a really sharp pencil. We had a really sharp pencil, and not only payroll, but had to be 10 or smaller employees. And not only that, they had to be in businesses that would stay in business. So if you think about what's a business that you always see on every corner, it's your insurance, right? State Farm, Allstate, right? You always see them. They've been there for decades, right? In your city, in your town. So they had a very sharp pencil around where they're going to break into, what kind of businesses. So not only did they avoid the pressure from, we need to offer everything, they also narrowed the focus on who is the right audience, and also how to sell. So they also narrowed it there. And as success grew and as they learned, they knew that they were eventually going to add on the other benefits that were there, but not until they succeeded in that space.
And did they, in fact, add on other things later?
They did. And they had, HR, they had different areas, and I had the company, and they eventually got acquired by Paychex. So
nice.
So they're still acquired by Paychex, and that was the exit strategy.
Amazing. I mentioned before we got started today that this is going to be like a coffee chat between friends.
Yeah.
So if people are like a fly on the wall listening over in the next booth at the coffee shop, they'll be like, I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. But I'm going to ask you this because you said you got to go narrow, have some real big success, and only then should you spread out. Is this the Peter Sheehan steel wall with the flashlight? Do you know that story?
I do, and I know Peter Sheehan well, and we both live here in Denver, where I am. Is it that it is a version of that, but it wasn't taken from that idea? So
interesting.
Yes,
So I saw Peter present this, and you've probably seen some version of this. He talks about like why some of these companies and some of these speakers, like I saw him in an NSA thing, why do some companies, some founders, some experts seem today to be all things to all people? And the metaphor, just very quickly, is imagine there's a steel wall and you have a big old flashlight, and you are aiming the flashlight's very broad beam, right? You're aiming the flashlight at the steel wall. What do you get? You get a spot of light on the steel wall. Now, so let's replace that with a high power industrial laser. You aim the high power industrial laser into the steel wall, sparks start to fly, you start to penetrate. Once you are through the steel wall, and only once you are through the steel wall, can you then take your flashlight, stick it into the hole that you just made, and then it starts to spread out on the other side of the steel wall. And it's like a bow tie shape, right? So it narrow in on one side and then broaden out on the other side. But you have to have that foundation of the who and the what and the where and the why, and get really, really good at staying within those boundaries. And then only then can you and should you explore, well, what's the next territory that we can tackle?
They're very similar. And ours was just the sharper the pencil.
Yes.
The sharper the point, the easier it is to penetrate through. And in order to have, if you think of a sharp point, it's very narrow versus a thick marker, right? Or
totally right.
Or something, right? So that's hard to penetrate. For us, it was the sharper the point, but you only can put a little bit on that sharp point to break on through. And that was definitely the strategy.
Well, let's talk about executive overwhelm and burnout and craziness, because people listening might think, oh my God, this must be a 24/7 job to be a CEO or a senior executive or an entrepreneur that has all of this focus and all of these ideas and all of these innovations very tightly focused on the sharp tip of the pencil. You say in the book, they actually don't do more, they do less with greater clarity. Expound on that for a moment.
Absolutely. So when you have anything is possible, and sometimes CEOs may go on to a listening tour and say anything is possible, and I actually say amplify other voices, like listen to other people. It's a critical part, but you need to have clarity around where your focus is. You're coming in as a leader, and you have done your homework, and you are there, and you're trying to accomplish a goal in this year, in this coming year. Have clarity around where that focus area is, and then ask for input. Because having it too broad, just like that analogy we just talked about, makes it very difficult not only to sort through all the different inputs that you're going to get, but also you can't take action on everything. And what happens is that when you ask for feedback or input or ideas, but you don't act on them, that people stop giving them to you, right? So I always say it's not survey fatigue, it's survey inaction. Right? It's not feedback. It's not that I'm tired of giving feedback. It's that you don't do anything with it. Right?
Yes.
So what does the CEO, the leader, the department head, what do? They have clarity around the focus area, but then they know that all those ideas are not going to come from the senior office, from their executive team, right? In fact, a lot of people say that the person with the best solution or best understands the problem is the one closest to the customer. And oftentimes that person who's closest to the customer is not in the conversation, not in the office.
Yeah.
So there are great stories, from Stanley, from Crocs, from in healthcare, in hospitals, where, whether it's nurses across every industry, that the person that interacts with the customer or the client is the one that sees those problems that need to be solved. So the executive needs to have clarity and share it around the focus areas, but then be open to a broader audience to provide input.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there. Let's talk about this, because I think this is a real problem area of getting input, doing nothing with it, sometimes even not acknowledging that you received the input. And then people are like, why am I filling out these? Why am I going to these meetings? Why am I filling out the new product online suggestion thing, right? Oh, one of our customers said it would be great if we had a product that did nothing, right? No acknowledgement, no thank you, no, hey, let's bring that up to the next R&D meeting, nothing. You mentioned that there's 5 actions that every leader can take to spark innovation. Can you run down what those 5 highlights of those 5 actions are?
I actually, rather than having that in front of me, I came up with some fresh ideas for you. So here's
perfect.
Okay, ones that have never been heard. Define one fence, right? Take 15 minutes to write down saying, what am I going to say no to? So have clarity around what you're not going to do, because it's just as powerful.
Oh my God.
Are going to do, right?
Totally.
And, one of my favorite quotes is from Miles Davis, so the legendary jazz musician. He said, it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. And I also think about like the Cheesecake Factory with their huge menu, but they're the most successful by revenue per square footage restaurant. The one that is In-N-Out Burger. 4 menu items, right? Burgers, fries, shakes, and sodas. So define what you are doing, but define what you're going to say no to, right? Define defense. The second is amplify an unexpected voice. So at your next team meeting or when you're meeting with a group of people, look at that junior person in the room. Find a way to make sure that you're not just saying the words, we want to hear from everyone, but make it purposeful. Have the intent to say, and don't surprise them with it. Approach them so that they know, listen, at our next meeting, I'm going to give an opportunity for you to share some insights, allow them to be prepared, but amplify those younger voices. And we have stories from Stanley and from Crocs where the great ideas that helped those companies grow tenfold did not come from the C-suite, but from an intern and a young sales associate.
Right.
So third is I call it the math of more tries or take more shots, right?
Yeah.
But once you've provided clarity and you've said, this is where we're working and this is where our risk capacity is, then pick something that you've been hesitating on and reach out and test a new idea. Take more shots in it. I've done that as a wildlife photographer. I have to. I always talk about my 10,000 failures to get one perfect hummingbird shot. But
Yeah.
I knew my capacity in that. So define a fence, to say what you know what you're going to say no to, amplify an unexpected voice, and take more shots.
Love those. Absolutely. And I have to smile because I've done interviews about my books, like you've done many interviews about your books. I don't know what the hell's on page 77, but oh, David, that thing on page 77, talk about that. I'm like, I got nothing. I was like, could you tell me what's on page 77? Oh yeah, no, it's your idea about whatever. And then we can, then we're into it. But yeah, it's like, if you think, by the way, folks, if you think that authors have like, hundreds of pages, like, probably written 1,200 plus pages in your 4 books. If you think we know what's in those books just by heart, we don't, because we've studied, we've written, we've rewritten, we've rewritten the rewrites, we've edited the rewritten rewrites. We've seen this stuff 1,000 times. We've spoken about it many thousands of times. But don't ask me what's on page 77 because I have no idea. Sheri has no idea what's on page 77 either. So it's all good.
But I'm going to look it up now. What's on 77?
Now we're going to find out. I'd love to find out what's on page 77 of all my books.
Right.
So let's talk about the association world, just because I think a lot of our listeners, whether they're executives or entrepreneurs or consultants or experts of some kind, the concept of a trade and professional association in 2025, 2026, how are they doing? What's going on? How is their role shifting in the professional landscape? What can we expect from an association membership that is new, cool, and exciting if they're doing it right?
So first, I want to thank you for saying the distinction between professional and trade, because people who are not in the industry will call them all trades. And a trade association is an organization that represents companies or organizations or institutions, and a professional represents individuals that are in that. So thank you for that distinction, because I rarely hear that. So a lot of them have done exceptionally well by delivering an important credential, by delivering guidelines and standards, by doing all the things that match up to their mission. We want to make people healthier, safer, and we want to create that assurance that when you go see a doctor, that when you get in your car, that when you drive, that the food you eat, the roads you drive on, all that is safe and that you can trust us. And that is why associations exist. But what they've struggled with was we'll build it and you will come to us, and we are the only game in town for you to, as an individual or company, and for you to succeed in business or in your profession or your line of work. Yeah. And over the last 15 years, it happened gradually, but as we all know, there were many more options that I call good enough, right? And the good enough could be cost. The good enough could be, the quality of their work is good. Yours might be better, but what they offer is more accessible. I need something. Yeah. And so where I've seen the struggle of them is that they haven't aligned the delivery of what they're sharing and what they're doing, which is all super important, with the way people live and think and act and do today. Now, the ones that are experimenting, and they've said, this is the space that we're going to play, right? We are going to make sure that everything we offer to the fence is accessible. Right? That could be just a simple fence that they set up, a simple boundary. Whatever we do, anything new product we do, it's got to be accessible. And by having that in space and knowing that, that's when they're starting to see a growth in membership and more people going to them and more success and more revenue. And because many people have heard no money, no mission, right? So they need to make money. Yeah. But in order to do that, they need to have clarity around what do we need to do and change to align with the needs of the market.
And I'm also curious, just as far as your speaking endeavors over the past 15 years, has that been mostly association, mostly corporate, or really a mix?
Mostly association with some corporate. So when you speak to an association, you have a number of corporate individuals that will be in the audience. And so it will generate one or two speaking gigs afterwards. They'll say, I love the content. I love your delivery. Can you bring this to my company?
Yeah.
So my focus has been on associations, but it's expanding right now to corporate as well.
And I'm curious, if you could turn the clock back 15 years, what would you say were some of the keys to your early success of landing those association gigs? Was it the research angle? Was it the fact that you were an insider yourself for so long? What were the magic beans?
The first thing that comes to mind is that I have always looked at things differently than anyone else. I was always that person that said, let's try a different way to do this.
Yeah.
And even all the way back to the days when I actually created a bobblehead of my CEO and a buzz campaign. And in fact, I have the bobblehead behind me on my desk. And he is now the CEO of RIMS, the Risk Management Society, still a good friend. We still joke about that bobblehead. And so I was always seen as somebody who was willing to take risk, calculated risk, to try new things, to experiment and be really creative. And then I've always given back. So I've written a number of books and I've donated all the proceeds to these best-selling books to the ASAE Foundation. And that enabled me to really be a part of conversations and to be in the room with people who were also doing that. So that was a strategy, but it was also giving back. And then third, probably is just that I spent 3 years at associations. So I could walk into a room, and I've been on the board of directors for ASAE. So I've been on the staff, I've been on the board of directors, I've been the volunteer leader, and now I'm the consultant. So I still can walk into any room and say, I sat in your seat. You don't want ideas that aren't actionable. Like you want them based in reality. And I've been there. I've been the decision maker and the person who's had to implement it. So
I'll tell you, I've heard a lot of innovative, smart, generous, win-win strategies. Donating the profits from all of your books to the ASAE Foundation, that is now the top of the list.
Oh, well, thank you.
And what is the name of the ASAE person who's in charge of the foundation right now, in case they want to get some David Newman checks? What is his or her name?
Yeah, Morgan, Morgan. It's Morgan. But
Morgan, I'm coming for you, Morgan. The checks are coming in.
You know what? The great thing is it was always win-win, because
of course
I would say, buy this book, it's going to help you. But it's also win-win because every time you buy the book, you are making a donation to the foundation.
So good.
And, happy to do it.
Amazing. Well, as we're landing the plane, I have two final questions for you. The final question is, where can people get more Sheri Jacobs in their lives? The second to last question is, if folks were to take one overarching idea from our far-ranging conversation today about the power and the importance of boundaries, what would you say that overall takeaway idea should be? That
boundaries don't create limits. They actually enable higher levels of creativity and exploration. It is completely the misconception that people have. But once you put them in place, and now that if you've listened to this podcast from start to finish, you're going to see effective boundaries everywhere. And you're going to see that when you're stuck, it's because you don't have clarity around it. So boundaries don't limit. They actually create opportunities.
Totally fantastic. Where can people go to connect and get more Sheri Jacobs?
Very easy, which is SheriJacobs.com, which is SHERI, 1R. And if you go to SheriJacobs.com, I have the books, the soon to be released book is on there as well. So they can get more information, download resources, and purchase books if they're interested.
And of course, hire you for keynotes and training, seminars, the whole jazz.
Mostly keynotes. So
mostly keynotes.
Not as much training seminars, but
scratch the training, folks. It's not happening. You don't have that kind of money. You don't have that kind of money to get Sheri Jacobs for a day. But 45 minutes, 70 minutes, I don't know, whatever. That you can afford, and that you should totally do.
Oh,
so we'll have that link. We'll link to the book when the book comes out, and we'll also obviously link to SheriJacobs.com, spelled the right way, so that people can simply click on that directly under this episode at thessellingshow.com. Sheri Jacobs, you are a rock star. This time flew by. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all the value bombs you shared.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure, and I had a lot of fun.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.